My name is Samira Hassan. I was born and raised in a small town in northern Nigeria. I confess I never imagined one day I would stand before you, opening up about my life this way. Where I come from, telling you what I'm about to share now is almost like signing your own death warrant. Abandoning Islam isn't seen as a personal choice. It's seen as betrayal. And for many, it can cost them their lives. But today I am here, alive, by the grace of God, to reveal what happened to me. My childhood was shaped by strict traditions. My father was an imam, and from the age of 5, I was instructed in the Quran, attended Islamic school, prayed 5 times a day, covered my hair, fasted during Ramadan, and obeyed every rule I was told was necessary to please Allah. Islam wasn't just my faith. It was my identity, my destiny, all I knew. I didn't dare question anything, because to question meant dishonoring my family. Yet, deep down, something didn't fit. It was as if a void silently accompanied me. I prayed, but I didn't feel heard. I memorized verses, but my soul remained heavy. I remember one night in particular. I was kneeling on the prayer rug, tears falling into the silence of the room. I asked Allah why I felt so alone, why it felt like no one was listening to me. But as always, no answer came. And I kept this burden to myself. Not even my mother was allowed to know. In our town, no one dares say something like that. You just obey, do your part, and follow tradition. Little did I know that one day all of this would change, that an unexpected event would break that silence and change the course of my life forever. My name is Layla Muhammad, and this may be your first time hearing my story. What I'm about to tell you isn't easy to remember, but it's impossible to keep to myself. I grew up in Kafina, a city in northern Nigeria, where being Muslim wasn't just a part of life. It was my whole life. My father, Hassan Muhammad, was a respected imam, and I carried the weight of that title since I was a child. My earliest memories are of the sound of the call to prayer echoing through the streets, waking before sunrise to join my mother in the dawn prayer. When I was just 4 years old, I could already recite Surah Al-Fatiha by heart. By 6, I knew entire passages of the Quran, far more than other children my age. Every Friday after school, I accompanied my father to the mosque. People greeted me respectfully, calling me the Imam's daughter. That was my identity. The obedient girl, the devout Muslim, the exemplary daughter. I wore my hijab with pride. My mother said modesty was a woman's crown. During Ramadan, we fasted from sunrise to sunset. I didn't do it just because it was obligatory. I truly believed it was the only way to please Allah. I prayed 5 times a day, memorized more verses than my peers, and obeyed every rule without question. But if I'm honest with you, there was a silent war raging inside me. As a little girl, I remember one day at the mosque when I was about 12. I was in the women's section, surrounded by prayers and murmurs of the Quran, and yet I felt a huge void. I looked around and thought, why does everyone seem so peaceful except me? I never spoke about it to anyone. Not my mother, not my brothers, not even myself. In our culture, especially for a woman, questioning was seen as rebellion. So, I kept quiet. As I grew older, that emptiness only grew. I studied at Islamic school while also attending regular school. While my friends talked about marriage and future husbands, I huddled in my room at night, asking Allah for just one thing: to feel peace, even just once. I thought the problem was me. I thought I wasn't faithful enough, that maybe I'd never be good enough. I remember when I was 16 and quietly asked my father, "Baba, why do I sometimes feel that Allah is so far away from me?" He looked at me seriously and replied, "Never say that, Layla. Shaitan is trying to confuse you. Pray more, fast more, and stop overthinking." That day I learned to silence my questions once and for all. I became the very image of a Muslim. I fasted, prayed, and covered myself from head to toe. On the outside, I appeared strong. People praised me, telling me I would be rewarded, that I would have a good husband and enter paradise. But inside, I felt trapped. And it was during this period that I began having strange dreams. Dreams of a vast desert where I wandered alone, searching for water. Sometimes I heard a voice calling my name, but I could never find its source. I didn't tell anyone. They said dreams didn't matter. But inside me, it felt like a scream. Then came that day. The day I still call the silent farewell. I was at the Sabanori market with my younger sister Yasmin. We were buying onions and spices for my mother. I remember the heat burning my skin beneath my veil, the noise of the stalls, the dust rising from our hurried footsteps. It was as we crossed near the main intersection. Suddenly, I heard tires screeching, screams, and my sister's voice calling my name in desperation. After that, silence. A suffocating silence. People always ask me what it's like to die. I wish I could explain. In that instant when everything went dark, I felt no pain. It was as if someone had flipped a switch. Simply, nothing. And suddenly I realized I was no longer in that place. I was in another environment, a space impossible to describe with human words. That was where my journey truly began. It was there that I met someone I never imagined I would see. But before I tell you what happened, I need you to understand something. I wasn't looking for Jesus. I wasn't seeking Christianity. I didn't even have any questions left. I was just a Muslim woman from Kafina, living the way I thought God wanted. I believed I knew God, but in reality, I didn't. And it was in that moment between life and death that the truth revealed itself to me. In the next part of my story, I'll tell you what I saw when I crossed over to the other side. A place shrouded in darkness, where a voice broke the silence. A voice that changed absolutely everything. Many people don't understand this, but wearing the hijab, following every rule of Islam, fasting throughout Ramadan, and memorizing entire chapters of the Quran doesn't necessarily mean peace. I followed everything to the letter. I was obedient, respectful, and dedicated. On the outside, I seemed the perfect image of a Muslim woman. But inside, there was a battle no one knew about. I never confessed this to anyone. Not my mother, not my sister Yasmin, not my best friend. I kept this secret like someone hiding an open wound. In my family, in my community, admitting doubts was like confessing failure. Worse still, it was seen as rebellion against Allah. And I never wanted to bring shame to my father. He was a respected imam, a leader of many, a counselor to all. How could I look him in the eye and tell him that his own daughter felt lost? There were nights when I prayed until my knees ached, asking Allah to answer me. But all I received was silence. Lying in my room, sharing the space with my sister, I hid my face in my veil so that not even my breathing betrayed my crying. And deep down, the questions burned. Why won't this emptiness go away? Why do my prayers feel so heavy, as if they'll never reach heaven? What's wrong with me? I tried even harder. I prayed more than was required. I memorized more verses than necessary. I even started getting up at dawn to say the extra prayers, believing that perhaps, in that quiet hour, Allah would notice me. But nothing happened. My father preached about God's mercy and love, and I wanted to believe, but it seemed too distant, as if God were just a judge sitting high above, watching from afar, never coming near. Sometimes I wondered if I'd been rejected, if perhaps I'd committed some sin that had made me unworthy, and I began to hate myself for it. I'd see my mother smile after prayers, that peace etched on her face, and I'd silently envy her. I wanted to feel that too. I wanted to feel that God saw me. But instead, I felt invisible. I'll never forget one Friday. We were returning from Juma prayer. My father was teaching some boys to memorize a surah in the courtyard. I stood beside him, smiling to hide it, but inside I was screaming. I wanted to ask, "Father, what if someone does everything right and still feels empty?" But I kept quiet. I took the copies of the Quran and handed them to the children, hiding the weight that was crushing me. That night I cried again. I asked Allah, "Why are you so distant? Why does your silence consume me? But the answer never came. And it was this silence that began to break me inside. I thought about running away, abandoning everything. But where would I go? I was just a young girl in Kafina. Islam was the only world I knew. There was no room to even imagine another faith. In my town, talking about Christianity was practically forbidden. They said it was a southern thing. In my home, the subject was never mentioned. For me, since childhood, Christianity was a lie, something distant, something that had nothing to do with me. That's how I was taught, and that's how I believed. So I followed the routine. I woke up early, put on my hijab, knelt on the prayer mat, and repeated the same words day after day. But deep down, a question suffocated me. Did God really hear me? No one knew. Under the veil, I was just a young woman trying to breathe, trying not to fall apart, while inside I felt trapped and increasingly hopeless. Many nights I would silently ask myself, will my life be like this forever? Will this emptiness never go away? But the answers never came. Silence was all I received. This silence accompanied me until the day of the accident, the day my life ended here. And another voice answered me. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was an ordinary Saturday. The sun was blazing. The streets were crowded and noisy, as always. My younger sister Yasmin and I went to the Sabanori market to buy onions, tomatoes, and spices for our mother. It was an almost every weekend routine. That morning, everything seemed normal. I laughed along with my sister as we crossed the street near the main intersection. She teased me, saying that a boy had asked about me the week before. I smiled and nodded, never imagining that those would be some of my last words on this side of life. Suddenly, everything changed. The sound of tires braking, the smell of burning rubber on the asphalt, screams, and my sister's voice calling my name desperately. Then, silence. There was no pain, as many people think. It was as if my body was no longer mine. I felt weightless, disconnected, as if I were floating somewhere else. I still saw flashes, feet running toward me, Yasmin crying, voices screaming for help. But everything seemed distant, muffled, as if I were underwater. And then, darkness. Total darkness. I could no longer feel my body. There was no breathing, no heartbeat. Just silence. From afar, I heard my mother's voice crying, and then my father reciting verses from the Quran. But these sounds began to fade away like fading echoes. I wanted to respond, tried to move my mouth, but nothing. I wanted to get up, but I couldn't. And a thought crossed my mind. Am I dying? Is this how death comes? What came next was even more frightening. The darkness seemed to gain weight, as if it were something alive, something that wanted to swallow me whole. Fear gripped me. I wasn't ready to die. I tried to pray, to recite the words of protection I'd learned since childhood, but no sound came out. My mind was blank. It was at that moment, amidst the darkness, that I heard a voice. At first, I thought I was just imagining it, but I wasn't. It was a real voice. It didn't sound harsh or distant, as I'd always imagined God's voice would. It was firm, yet calm. A clear, close voice, calling my name. And it wasn't what my parents called me. It wasn't Layla Muhammad. It was just Layla, so softly, as if that voice had always known me. I froze. Who was calling me? As I tried to understand, I noticed the darkness around me beginning to fade, like shadows receding. And in the distance, I saw a light. Small at first, like a star lost in the dark sky. But it approached slowly, unhurriedly, steadily. I wanted to run toward that light, but I was paralyzed, like a prisoner inside myself. It was then that the voice spoke again. Layla, don't be afraid. At that moment, I broke down. I started crying. They weren't physical tears, because I no longer had a body. It was something deeper, coming from my soul. It was as if I had been completely exposed. At that moment, I wanted to ask, "Who are you?" But the words wouldn't come. All I felt was an indescribable warmth, a presence so real it seemed to envelop me completely. It was as if love itself had embraced me. The light grew ever closer, filling everything around me until there was no room left for darkness. I wanted to explain exactly what I saw and felt, but there are no human words sufficient to convey it. It wasn't just a light, it was a person. And even though I didn't immediately understand who it was, I knew he knew me. He knew every tear I shed hidden beneath the veil. He knew every prayer that went unanswered. He knew the war I waged silently within myself. And yet, he loved me. It was at that moment that I felt something I had never experienced in my life. Peace. Not fear, not judgment, not emptiness. Just peace. As my body lay sprawled on a dusty road, being carried by desperate people, I was no longer there. I was in that place of light, and I didn't want to go back. But then the voice spoke again, this time more firmly. Times. I was confused. Go back? Why? The voice repeated, Go back, Layla. It's not your time yet. Tell them about me. Before I could understand, I felt like I was being pulled back, dragged back through a tunnel at an impossible speed. I heard screams, heard my mother's voice in despair. And then came the pain. A crushing pain, searing my chest. I gasped, and my eyes flew open. I was in the hospital. All around me, everything was crying and running around. Yasmin held my hand as she wept. My mother murmured prayers over and over. And my father, that man who never cried, stood in the corner, tears falling silently. But in that moment, none of that mattered. There was only one question in my mind. Who was that voice? Who called me by name and then told me to come back? Why did he send me back? I didn't know it yet, but that experience had marked the end of the life I knew and the beginning of a new journey. One I had never asked for, but one that would change everything. In the months that followed, I doubted it myself. I wondered if it had just been a dream, a delusion of someone on the verge of death. But deep down, I knew the truth. Nothing about it was ordinary. Because while my body was inert in the hospital, something supernatural happened. Suddenly, I realized I could see, not with my eyes, but in another way. I was floating above the room and seeing everything clearly. I saw my body motionless on the bed. I saw my mother clutching my hand, crying desperately. I saw Yasmin leaning against the wall, sobbing uncontrollably. I saw my father trying to maintain his composure, reciting verses, but trembling inside. And I thought, why do they cry so much for me? I'm right here. I tried to talk to them, to touch my mother's shoulder, but I couldn't. I was no longer in my body. I was light, weightless, unlike anything I had ever felt. Then, in the blink of an eye, the hospital disappeared. I was no longer in that room. I was somewhere else. First came the darkness, but it wasn't like night. It was a living, dense, suffocating darkness. I was surrounded by it and didn't know where to go. Fear gripped me like never before. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My mind was in turmoil. Where am I? Am I dead? Is this the punishment I always feared? Am I in hell? I tried to remember the prayers. I tried to recite the words of protection I'd learned since childhood. But nothing came to mind. I was blank. And that made me even more frightened. Just when I thought I would be swallowed by that darkness, something happened. In the distance, I saw a small light. At first, it seemed just a distant star, but it grew brighter and brighter. And as it got closer, I noticed the darkness receding, like smoke being blown away. It was then that I heard that voice again. It wasn't harsh, nor angry. It was calm, firm, charged with a different strength, and it called my name. Not the way my father used to, not formally, but intimately, simply, Layla. In that instant, I froze. Who could possibly know my name there in that place? I was terrified, but at the same time, I felt an irresistible pull toward that voice. And she said again, Layla, don't be afraid. Suddenly, The light advanced, not as slowly as before, but all at once. It enveloped me completely, filling every space. In that glow that enveloped me completely, I saw him. A man dressed in white, purer than I had ever seen before. His presence was indescribable. He didn't shine like a lamp, but it was as if all the light came from him. What struck me most were his eyes. They were eyes that saw beyond my face, eyes that penetrated my soul. They knew every hidden shame, every secret fear, every unanswered prayer. And yet, there was no condemnation there, only love, true love, complete love. When I looked at his hands, I noticed deep marks, scars that looked like wounds. And in that instant, without anyone explaining it to me, I knew who he was. There was no doubt, no debate. I knew it was Jesus. I had never studied the Bible, never really read about him. But in that place of light, looking into his face, I just knew. Then he spoke. His words echoed within me. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I couldn't answer. I stood there, broken, exposed, as if nothing could be hidden from him. I thought he would judge me, but instead, he touched my heart. And in that touch, everything changed. All my pain, all the emptiness, every tear hidden beneath the veil, it all vanished. All those nights I felt rejected. Every weight of guilt I carried, believing I wasn't worthy. He took it all away in a single instant. And then he said something that marked my soul forever. I called you by name. You are mine. When I heard this, I couldn't contain myself. My soul fell before him. I cried like I had never cried before, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of liberation, of peace. It was then that Jesus showed me my own life. Not with anger, not to shame me, but like a father showing his son where he's lost. I saw myself as a little girl, praying and asking for peace. I saw the nights I felt rejected. I saw the emptiness I carried in my heart. And then he showed me something even deeper, that without knowing it, what I had always been looking for was him. He told me, I was with you. Even when you didn't know me, I saw every tear. I heard every cry. I waited for you. At that moment, for the first time in my life, I felt whole. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay forever. But then Jesus looked at me with a mixture of love and authority that I can't describe. He said, times. I didn't understand. How could I go back? I didn't want to leave. He repeated, come back. It's not your time yet. Tell me about me. I pleaded silently, asking to stay, but his will was firm. Come back, Layla. Tell them you found me. And in the blink of an eye, the light disappeared. I was pulled backward with impossible speed, as if traveling through a tunnel in strong winds. I heard my name being called in the hospital. The pain returned. Air suddenly rushed into my lungs. I was back in my body. I opened my eyes, gasping, like someone emerging after a long time underwater. My heart was pounding, my vision was blurry, my body felt shattered. But I was alive. The first voice I recognized was Yasmin's. She was crying desperately, holding my hand tightly. Layla! Layla! She's awake! Mommy, she's breathing! I slowly turned my face and saw my mother fall to her knees, her handkerchief slipping as she cried out in thanks to God through her tears. And my father, that man so firm, so respected, was standing in the corner, silent, with tears streaming down his face. But I couldn't focus on any of it. My thoughts were stuck on him, on that man who called me by name, on the one who told me, "You're mine." Jesus. I didn't understand why he had come to me, a young Muslim woman from northern Nigeria. I wasn't seeking him. I wasn't looking for Christianity. But he came. He called me. And deep down in my heart, I knew. Nothing would be the same after this. I had never seen my father cry. That steadfast man, respected as an imam, had tears in his eyes, his lips moving softly as he recited verses from the Quran. For them, a miracle had happened. For me, something impossible had happened. As everyone thanked Allah for my life, all I could think about was Him, Jesus. I was too weak to speak, but deep inside me, memories of that light and that gaze consumed me. The sound of His voice echoed. I called you by name. You are mine. I wanted to shout it to the world, but fear gripped me tighter than any pain in my body. How could I tell my father, the Imam, that in the place where I died, I didn't see Allah, nor angels reciting the Quran? I saw Jesus? The struggle within me was intense. What if it was a mistake? What if it was a test? I remembered the warnings I'd heard since childhood. Dreams about Jesus come from the devil. But deep in my heart, I knew it wasn't a lie. I had felt the love, I had seen the light, I had found the truth. Still, I remained silent. I spent days in the hospital silent, pretending only to be tired. I heard people coming in and out of the room, aunts, uncles, neighbors, all extolling the goodness of Allah, saying that my life had been spared for a special purpose. I smiled weakly, but inside, my heart ached, because I knew who had truly saved me. And it wasn't the God I was taught about since childhood. I felt torn between two worlds. At night, when everyone else was asleep, I lay staring at the ceiling, tears silently streaming down my face. The same question tormented me. What do I do now? Why did Jesus choose me? Why me? My prayers changed. They were no longer memorized repetitions. I spoke directly to Him, as if speaking to someone present with me. In the darkness of the room, I whispered, Jesus, if it was really you, show me again. I was afraid to leave Islam, afraid to follow it. But most of all, I was afraid of the silence. I didn't want it to disappear. I didn't want to return to the emptiness of before. The memory of His voice was all I had left, like a child holding tightly to the last bit of security they have. But at the same time, I knew the risk. If I opened my mouth, my life could end. In my town, stories of people leaving Islam weren't legends. They were warnings. I knew of cases of girls who had been beaten, locked in their homes, or even killed. I didn't want to shame my father or bring dishonor to my family. So I buried that encounter deep in my soul, like someone hiding a secret wound. But hidden wounds don't heal. They grow. And that's what happened to me. On the outside, I smiled and pretended to be recovering. But inside, I was dying in a different way. Dying of confusion, of fear, of hunger to hear that voice again. When I finally left the hospital, life seemed to return to normal. Physically, I was weak, but I could walk, talk, and receive visitors. My mother told everyone I was a miracle. My father, though silent, showed me a different kind of respect. Neighbors and relatives would come to our house saying, Allah has favored you. But deep down, I knew the truth. It hadn't been Allah. I had found someone different. And this certainty haunted me. Every morning I woke with two worlds fighting inside me. One was the world I knew. Islam, my family, tradition, the rules. Safe, predictable, but empty. The other was unknown, frightening. All I had was a memory. Jesus' face, His voice, His words. I called you by name. You are mine. And even without understanding, that new world felt like home to me. I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to tell her. But every time I tried, fear overwhelmed me. What if my father kicked me out? What if my mother rejected me? What if my community found out? I knew very well what was happening in Kafina. Conversion was synonymous with danger. So I kept quiet. But silence never brought peace. At night, when everyone was asleep, I would curl up in the corner of my room, tears streaming down my face, and whisper, Jesus, if you really are who you say you are, don't leave me. I remember one night in particular. I was desperate, lying in the room in silence, and I whispered softly, Jesus, if you really are who you say you are, please help me. I don't know what to do. It was then that something strange happened. A hunger arose within me, a need I couldn't explain. I needed to know more about him, but I couldn't ask my father. I couldn't trust my friends. So I began to search secretly. One morning, while everyone was asleep, I secretly grabbed my sister Yasmin's small cell phone. I went to the bathroom, locked the door, and typed, "Who is Jesus in dreams?" What I found shocked me. They were stories. Stories from other Muslims, from Iran, Egypt, even Nigeria. People who had also seen a man dressed in white. People who claimed Jesus had appeared to them in dreams. I sat on the cold floor, shivering, tears streaming down my face. For the first time, I realized I wasn't alone. I wasn't going crazy. Others had been through what I had. I read those stories until dawn, and something inside me began to break. I wanted more. I needed to understand. So I kept going. I researched at midnight, in secret. I typed, "Jesus calling Muslims," and I found testimonies. I found videos of people who risked their lives to say, "I found him." In one of these videos, a man repeated the exact words Jesus had said to me. "I called you by name. You are mine." My whole body trembled. I knew it wasn't a coincidence. I wasn't imagining it. Jesus had really come to me. But the question that haunted me was, and now, do I leave everything behind? Do I tell my family? I felt suffocated, trapped between truth and fear. I wanted Jesus, but I didn't know how to follow him. The more I read, the more the hunger grew. I stopped sleeping well, stopped eating well. My mother thought it was just part of recovery, but in reality, it was the battle within me. I spent days asking him silently, "Why me, Lord? Why did you choose me? What do you want from me?" And for a while, there was no answer, until one night, when I least expected it, he came again. And it wasn't in a dream. It was waking, real, before my eyes. He was in my room, standing at the foot of my bed. The next morning, I knew I could no longer remain silent. The fear was still there, heavy, suffocating. But a greater peace had taken its place. It wasn't the peace of someone who has had an easy life. It was the peace that stands firm in the midst of the storm, saying, "Whatever happens, you are not alone." When I saw him that night, his eyes looked at me the same way they had before, full of love, full of truth. His voice was soft but clear. He said only one sentence, "Layla, don't be afraid. Follow me." And then he disappeared. But his presence remained, and his words echoed inside me endlessly. The next morning, everything seemed the same, but I was no longer the same. I sat quietly at breakfast. My mother watched me worriedly, as if sensing something was wrong. My father was already getting ready for the mosque, reciting the usual verses. Yasmin tried to joke with me as usual, but I barely responded. I felt like a stranger in my own home. By noon, I couldn't bear the weight inside me any longer. I waited for my father to return from the mosque. I waited for my mother to finish the meal. I waited for Yasmin to lock herself in her room. Then I sat down in front of them and, with a trembling voice, said, "I need to tell you something." My father looked at me worriedly. My mother stopped stirring the pot. I took a deep breath and whispered, "I saw someone when I was between life and death." "Who?" my father asked, his tone serious but gentle. I swallowed hard. My heart felt like it was going to explode. Jesus. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. I saw my father's face change. First confusion, then disbelief, then fear. My mother dropped her spoon. Before I lost my courage, I continued. When I died, I didn't see what we were always taught. I didn't hear the voice of Allah. I didn't see angels reciting. I saw Jesus, and he called me by my name. My mother muttered something under her breath. My father stood up, his voice trembling, not with anger, but with terror. "Stop. Stop this madness. You're confused. This is the work of the enemy." Tears streamed down my eyes, and I replied, "No, Baba, I'm not confused. It was real. He came to me. He had returned to me. Once again, Jesus told me to follow him. But before I could explain, my father raised his hand, not to hit me, but to silence me. "Don't say anything else," he said firmly. My mother began to cry softly. These weren't ordinary tears of sadness. They were the tears of someone with a broken heart. She couldn't even look at me. The rejection in her silence hurt more than any harsh words could have. My father paced restlessly. Then he stopped, turned to me, and spoke words I never imagined I would hear. "You are no longer my daughter." In that instant, I broke down. Tears flowed uncontrollably, but my mouth couldn't utter a single word. My heart felt like it was shattering into pieces inside my chest. My mother left the room, covering her head, as if to protect herself from the shame of my words. Yasmin, my younger sister, heard the commotion and ran over to us. She looked at me, startled, not understanding. I wanted to hug her, explain, say goodbye, but I couldn't. My father just repeated, "Pack your things." That night, I sat alone in my room, the only home I'd ever known, folding my few clothes into a small bag. Yasmin stood in the doorway crying softly, unsure why her sister was being kicked out. I wanted to explain that this wasn't the end, but I couldn't, because deep down, I knew it wasn't goodbye. Jesus hadn't abandoned me, and even though I was rejected by my family, I wasn't alone. I left home with no destination, no money, no plan. I just walked. The streets of my city had never felt so cold. Every face I passed felt like a stranger. I clutched my small purse tightly, tears stinging my eyes, but I forced myself not to cry in public. Inside, I felt empty, but at the same time, not lost. Because the words Jesus had spoken to me echoed in my heart. "Don't be afraid. Follow me." After a few hours of aimless wandering, I realized my feet had led me to the gates of a small church. I hadn't even noticed where I was going. It was late at night, the gates were closed, but the light was still on inside. I stood there for a long time, unsure of what to do. I wasn't even sure if Christians would accept someone like me. In my town, Muslims and Christians lived separately. I had never spoken to a pastor in my life, but that night, I summoned up my courage and knocked. After a few minutes, an older woman opened the door. Her gaze was immediately kind. She asked me softly, "My daughter, what happened to you?" I broke down. The tears finally spilled over. She didn't ask any questions, didn't hesitate, just welcomed me and led me inside. That night, for the first time in a long time, I slept peacefully. In the days and weeks that followed, I stayed in a small shelter affiliated with that church. I met people who didn't care about my last name or the religion I was born into. They simply loved me. They listened to my story without judgment. I told the pastor everything: the accident, the darkness, the voice, the man dressed in white. When I finished, he smiled calmly and said, "Layla, Jesus found you because he chose you. Now you belong to him." At that moment, something inside me broke free. I finally understood. I wasn't a mistake. I wasn't mistaken. I had been found. A few days later, on a quiet morning, I knelt on the floor of that small church. Without a prayer rug, without words in Arabic, just with an open heart, I declared, "Jesus, I'm yours." It was the beginning of my new life. The emptiness that had tormented me for years disappeared. I had peace. Real peace, not fear of punishment, not empty rituals, but a living relationship, a savior, a friend. Today, I am no longer Layla Muhammad, daughter of the Imam. I am Layla, daughter of Christ. And even though I lost so much, I realized I gained everything. Because Jesus is worth more than anything. My life no longer resembles what it once was. I no longer wake to the echoing call of the mosque, nor do I wear the veil out of obligation. I no longer carry the weight of unanswered prayers, nor the silent fear that accompanied me every day. Now I wake up with peace in my heart, a peace I've never known before. Because Jesus didn't just meet me in that light, he stays with me every day. Today, I live in a small Christian community that has become my family. Today, I live far from my hometown, Kafina. Life isn't easy. I carry with me a longing I can't put into words. Sometimes I sit in silence, remembering my mother's face, my father's firm voice, my younger sister's innocent laughter. I pray for them every day. They're no longer the mechanical prayers I used to make, but supplications filled with hope. Hope that one day they too will know Jesus the way I did. Here I found a new family. Brothers and sisters in Christ who walk beside me, strengthen me, and remind me that I'm never alone. Little by little, I've learned to read the Bible and discover what it means to be truly loved. Not for what I do, but for who Jesus is. I was baptized. In front of others, I declared out loud what I was once afraid to even whisper: I belong to Jesus. Since then, each day He heals broken parts of my heart. Each day He shows me that His grace is sufficient. I don't know what the future holds for me, but I know in whom I have placed my trust. My story is not about a young woman who abandoned her parents' faith. It's about a young woman who finally found the truth. And that truth has a name: Jesus Christ. To my Muslim brothers and sisters, I want to say, I understand you. I know the weight of the questions we're afraid to ask. I know the emptiness that can exist behind daily prayers. I know what it's like to cry silently, hidden, not understanding why God seems so distant. I've lived it. I wore the hijab. I prayed 5 times a day. I fasted every Ramadan. I tried to be perfect. But no matter how hard I tried, I felt invisible, unanswered, unloved. And it was precisely in my deepest darkness that Jesus came to me. He didn't come with condemnation. He didn't come with anger. He came with love. He brought me the peace I had been searching for all my life. I'm not asking you to reject everything outright. I know how scary that is. What I ask is something simple. Do what I did. Open your heart and ask. Use your own words and say, Jesus, if you are real, show yourself to me. That's what I said. And He answered. Today I can say with absolute certainty, you don't have to be perfect to be loved. You don't have to understand everything to be chosen. He already knows your name. He's seen your tears. He's waiting for you. To everyone listening now, whether Muslim, Christian, or even those who don't know what to believe, I want to leave you with one truth. Jesus is real. He is alive. And He loves you more than you can imagine. I lost everything: my family, my home, the life I knew. But in Jesus, I found everything that truly mattered. And if He came to someone like me, lost, broken, without hope, then you can be sure He will come to you too. Just call on His name. I am living proof that He answers. If you're listening to me now and feel something stirring within your heart, know this: it's no coincidence. Maybe you're confused. Maybe you're afraid. Maybe, like me one day, you're searching for peace and have never found it. I want you to know, Jesus sees you just as He saw me. You don't need fancy words. You don't need to change your name or the way you dress. You don't need to be perfect to get closer to Him. He loves you just the way you are, exactly as you are now. And if you truly want to know Him as I have, I invite you to pray with me. Wherever you are, sitting, lying down, even crying, speak from your heart. Jesus, I don't know everything about you, but I want to know you. I need you. I've searched for peace my whole life, and now I understand that you are the peace I seek. Forgive my sins. Wash me completely. I surrender my heart, my life, my all. Be my Lord. Be my Savior. I am yours. Amen. If you prayed this prayer, believe me, all of heaven is rejoicing for you right now. And I also want to pray for you. Lord Jesus, I thank you for each person listening to these words. You know each one's heart. You see their tears, their doubts, and their pain. Reveal yourself to them as you revealed yourself to me. Surround them with your love. Call them by name. Heal their wounds. Take away their fear and give them peace. May they never forget that they are not alone. In your mighty name I pray. Amen. Dear friend, welcome to the family of Christ. You are loved. You are chosen. You have a home. Thank you for staying with me until the end and listening to my story. I didn't share this to talk about myself, but because I know there are many out there experiencing the same thing I did. Searching in silence, afraid to speak out, but hungry for peace. I want you to know you are not alone. My life changed the day Jesus found me, and I believe He is calling you too. If this testimony touched your heart, share it with someone. Maybe this message is exactly what someone else needs to hear. You can be an instrument in changing a life. Subscribe to this channel, like, comment, and tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to pray for you personally. If you need prayer, guidance, or have questions about Jesus, write in the comments or send me a message. Never forget, Jesus is still calling people, Muslims, Christians, anyone who is willing to listen. I am living proof of that. Until we meet again, may the peace of Christ be with you. Keep seeking, and you will find. God bless your life.